It was a cold October night in rural Pennsylvania. The air was damp with the smell of fallen leaves, and the moon hung low, casting long silver shadows across the empty road. Jack had been driving for hours, heading back home after visiting a college friend. His phone battery had died long ago, leaving him with no GPS, no music, and nothing but the sound of his old car humming against the endless asphalt. The road he took was unfamiliar, one of those narrow, winding highways cutting through forests that stretched for miles. Jack wasn't worried at first. He loved the feeling of isolation, the way the world seemed to pause when he was alone on an empty road. But tonight, there was something different in the air. The silence felt heavy, pressing against his chest. Up ahead, he noticed something strange. A glow. At first, he thought it was just headlights from another car. But as he drove closer, he realized it wasn't moving. Instead, the light flickered, like the glow of lanterns. Then he heard it, music. Faint at first, but growing louder with every turn of the wheel. It was laughter, too. Dozens of voices carried on the crisp night air, cheerful and yet somehow hollow. Jack slowed his car, his curiosity outweighing the prickling unease creeping up his spine. Just beyond the trees he saw it. A gathering. A full-blown celebration in the middle of nowhere. Strings of lights hung between the trees, glowing with an eerie warmth. There were people dancing, clapping, and moving in circles to music that sounded old. Too old, like something from another century. Jack pulled his car to the side of the road. His headlights fell across the group, but no one seemed to notice. He killed the engine, stepped out, and stood there, shivering as the night wrapped around him. It didn't make sense. Who would throw a party here, deep in the woods with no houses for miles? As Jack stepped closer, he noticed how the dancers seemed strangely uniform. Their clothes were old-fashioned. Men in suspenders and wide-brimmed hats. Women in long dresses that fluttered as they spun. Felt like stepping into another time. The laughter, though cheerful, echoed unnaturally in the forest. One of the men broke from the circle and approached Jack. He was tall, with piercing eyes that caught the glow of the lanterns. His smile was wide, too wide, and yet strangely welcoming. "Evenin', stranger," the man said in a low voice, his accent unfamiliar, almost archaic. "Come join us. You've been on the road a long time." Jack froze. His instincts told him to leave, to get back into the car and drive. But something about the man's gaze held him. The party behind them continued, the music swelling louder, the fiddles scraping out a rhythm that made Jack's skin crawl. "I was just passing through," Jack said, his voice trembling. "Nonsense," the man replied, clapping a hand on Jack's shoulder. "No one passes through without celebrating with us." His grip was firm, colder than it should have been, and before Jack could protest, he was being led toward the circle of dancers. The crowd parted for him, their faces smiling but their eyes empty, like dolls. Jack swallowed hard, his chest tightening as the music wrapped around him, strange and hypnotic. He tried to step back, but the crowd had closed in behind him. Then he noticed something that made his stomach twist. The ground beneath the dancers wasn't dirt. It was uneven, filled with stones. Not just stones, headstones. The faint carvings of names and dates glimmered in the lantern light. They were dancing in a graveyard. Jack's heart pounded. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. The man who had led him in raised a cup of dark liquid and handed it to him. "Drink," he said firmly. "It's tradition." Jack shook his head. "No, I don't." But the crowd began to chant. Low at first, then louder, rising ABO. Jack's hands shook as the cup was pressed against his palm. The liquid inside was thick, darker than wine, and it carried a metallic smell that turned his stomach. The crowd's chanting grew louder, their eyes glowing faintly in the lantern light. His heart raced. If he refused, he felt certain something terrible would happen. But if he drank, he wasn't sure he wanted to know the consequences. Slowly, he raised the cup toward his lips, only to pause at the last moment. That's when he saw it, the reflection in the liquid. It wasn't his face. The image staring back at him was pale, hollow-eyed, and gaunt. like a corpse left too long in the ground. His breath caught in his throat, and he dropped the cup, spilling the liquid onto the grass. The crowd went silent. Every eye turned toward him. The music stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Jack had ever felt, crushing him from all sides. The tall man's grin widened into something inhuman, stretching impossibly far. "You shouldn't have done that," he hissed. The crowd closed in. Their once friendly faces twisted, revealing sharp teeth, hollow cheeks, and skin that peeled away like rotting flesh. Jack stumbled back, but there was nowhere to run. Their hands reached for him, cold and bony, clutching at his arms, his shoulders, his throat. He fought, kicking and pushing, his heart hammering against his ribs. Somehow, he broke free and sprinted toward the tree line, his legs burning as he forced himself deeper into the woods. Behind him, the chanting began again, louder than ever. "Join us, join us, join us." Branches clawed at his face, tearing his skin, but he didn't stop. He ran until his lungs screamed for air. Finally, he spotted it. His car, dimly illuminated by the weak glow of the headlights he had left on. Relief surged through him as he yanked the door open, slamming it shut behind him. His hands fumbled with the keys, slick with sweat. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. The music wasn't coming from behind him anymore. It was inside the car. Jack gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. The fiddles, the drums, the eerie laughter. It all echoed from the back seat as if the dancers had followed him. His breath came in ragged gasps as he dared to glance in the rearview mirror. First, nothing. Just the empty seats behind him. Then, slowly, faces began to appear in the glass. Hollow-eyed, grinning faces staring back at him, their mouths moving in unison with the music. Jack screamed and swerved, nearly losing control of the car as he sped down the winding road. The forest blurred by in streaks of black, but the music didn't fade. Louder and louder it grew, drilling into his skull until he thought his head might split open. "Stop it!" he shouted, slamming his hands against the steering wheel. "Leave me alone." The road ahead seemed endless, twisting and turning without end. He should have reached town by now, but the forest stretched on forever, trapping him in a loop. The trees leaned closer, their branches like skeletal arms reaching for the car. And then the headlights flickered, once, twice, and died. The car lurched to a stop, swallowed by the darkness. The music ceased. Silence fell, so sudden it made Jack's ears ring. His chest heaved as he sat there, gripping the wheel, too afraid to move. Then came the knock. A slow, deliberate tap-tap-tap on the driver's side window. Jack's head snapped to the left, and there, illuminated by the faint glow of the moon, stood the tall man. His grin was wider than ever, splitting his face like a crack in old porcelain. "Road ends here, friend," the man whispered, his voice muffled through the glass. "Time to join the celebration." Before Jack could react, the window shattered. Hands, cold, skeletal, endless, reached in, pulling at him, dragging him from the seat. He screamed, kicking and clawing, but the forest swallowed his cries. The dancers were waiting their CI. The world spun violently, colors and shapes melting into one another. Jack staggered as the ground beneath him seemed to vanish, replaced by swirling shadows and firelight. The music pounded in his skull, faster and faster, until it felt like his heartbeat had synced with the drums. When the dizziness cleared, he was no longer standing in the forest. He was in the middle of a vast ballroom, if it could even be called that. The ceiling stretched higher than the sky, the walls made of writhing shadows. Chandeliers of bone swung overhead, dripping with candle wax that hissed when it hit the floor. And surrounding him were the dancers, hundreds of them, their faces twisted into grotesque parodies of joy. The tall man stood at the center, his grin brighter than ever. "Welcome home," he said, his voice echoing from everywhere at once. Jack shook his head violently. "No, this isn't real. This isn't happening." But when he looked down, he saw that his hands were changing. his skin paling, his veins darkening, his fingernails lengthening into sharp, blackened claws. His breath caught as pain rippled through his body. He fell to his knees, screaming, but the dancers only cheered. The man knelt beside him, whispering into his ear, "You took the drink. Now you're one of us. There's no going back." Jack's scream turned into a guttural, inhuman roar. His eyes burned as his vision shifted, and when he looked at the crowd again, he didn't see monsters. He saw family. He saw joy. He saw the endless night that awaited him. The music swelled. Jack rose, no longer resisting. His lips curled into the same wide, unnatural grin as the others. And then he joined the dance. Hours, days, years, it no longer mattered. Time didn't exist in that place. Only the rhythm, the laughter, the endless celebration of the damned. Back on the highway, Jack's car was found the next morning, empty and abandoned, the windshield shattered. Locals whispered about that stretch of road, warning travelers.